Welcome back to African Voices, our show where we're talking about immigration and the organization Assist. Welcome back, Gina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Baillor, you're thinking about the differences between or the processes that Assist goes through in terms of assisting asylum seeker or failed asylum seeker destitutes.
Yeah, regarding to that, Gina, basically, my own thinking, I believe the way Assist works, it works in different ways for people who need your help. And there are people who apply sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, you just give them bus passes. Sometimes people just get the money, and sometimes people get houses, and sometimes there are people who are qualified for everything. So how do you assess those people, and you know, how do you work that out?
Okay. So when people first come, usually they come to the help desk in the asylum drop-in in Victoria Hall. And everybody, the sort of starting point for anybody that we find to be a refused destitute asylum seeker who's got no other way of meeting their needs, is that we offer £20 a week cash or £10 a week and a bus pass. So for us, that costs slightly more, but of course for the person that's not relevant. It you know, it's what works for them. And the bus pass is actually quite valuable for some people because being able to get round, see your lawyer, see your friends, meet your health appointments, just, you know, have a life and be able to travel around is actually quite an asset. It's a useful thing. So people make their own choice, which of those they'd like. We know £20 is not very much. But because we're supporting 90 people, we're not in a position to commit to putting it up, because once you've put it up, you've got to keep it there.
Definitely.
So we can't quite afford that at the moment. Who knows? We're hoping one day we will be able to put it up, but we can't at the moment.
So does it come at a point like, let's say, if you start helping someone, then their circumstances change. Do you come at a decision as well to say, look, this is this, and your circumstances have changed, so now we're going to review your cases? Because if I'm not mistaken, you cover the whole of South Yorkshire, isn't it?
No, we don't. It's Sheffield.
Okay, just Sheffield.
So, well, it's people who are presenting as destitute in Sheffield, and of course, because being destitute often means in order to sleep somewhere at night, you've got to keep moving. You know, people may well have places they're staying in Barnsley or Rotherham, or they're on the move. We're not saying you never sleep outside Sheffield, but basically Sheffield is our area, and we do take people from the whole of the S postcode if they present as destitute here.
Your help. And that means all genders as well.
Yes. Interesting and a bit disturbing. We've seen a fall off in the number of women that are coming to us. And although it pretty much reflects the national picture in terms of the numbers of women claiming asylum, we're not sure if there might be other reasons as well. So, you know, we are concerned about that. Women are obviously more prone to getting into abusive situations to avoid destitution. I mean, men do as well. So, you know, not every destitute asylum seeker comes to us. Some people are helped by their friends, by their compatriots or whoever, but some people are in abusive and exploitative situations. And obviously women are more vulnerable to that. So we're concerned, you know, if there are things that we're missing on that front, there may be. Also, probably more women have children. And at the moment, the current government policy is they are not made destitute when their asylum claim is finally refused. The government has been talking about bringing in a new policy whereby those women and all people with children will be made destitute when their claims are finally refused. But whether that will happen, we don't know. So there's issues about gender that we're looking at the moment and concerned about. In terms of change of circumstances, we see people very often. We see people sort of fortnightly to see how they're getting on, but we don't constantly review what we're giving because it's pretty minimal anyway. So, you know, you can't really just kind of tinker with that. A lot of people do want accommodation, need accommodation, and we've got a waiting list for accommodation. So people get into our accommodation basically when there's a space. So at the moment we've got 7 houses, 2 of which we own, 5 of which are leased to us by local people. And a number of places with hosts, so people who are willing to let their spare room or even their sofa be used by an asylum seeker. So we don't have enough spaces for all the 90 people, and not all the 90 people are looking for somewhere to sleep because For some people, if they've got a bit of cash, they can keep going with a friend because they can put something into the household. So they're contributing. So the bit of cash can actually enable people to keep a roof over their heads. It's more than just the cash itself.
Yeah.
But we don't even provide accommodation even for all those that want it, that are coming to us wanting it. So we have got a waiting list for accommodation.
I can't get over the fact that you have people that are providing housing and all that, and I think it's absolutely amazing. But connected to that, Gina, do you know if in other cities, in other areas across the country, there are people that are doing the good work that Assist does?
Yes, there are. I think, I don't know the latest figure. The last I knew was there are 37 organisations like Assist around the country. Not all of those are providing accommodation, but there's a national network of organisations like ourselves. We're one of the oldest, one of the biggest, but the very first one I think was in Manchester. And they're all around the country. Organisations, might just be a hosting scheme, or other kinds of support for people who are destitute. But we are unique, and we're also not the only one who's doing this kind of work.
That's amazing. I'm wondering, Gina, if there is a sense, given that you actually provide a bit of cash, you provide housing, and a lot of people who are destitute would just do with housing and not cash. In fact, that you provide cash is, to me, certainly amazing. You provide the bus passes is certainly amazing for a person who has nothing to do. And as you rightly say, £10 or £20 is to a destitute has the value of more than £10 or £20. It becomes the roof over your head, because then it enables you to move, to talk to people who may provide you with accommodation. So it's a base that then creates a lot of resource above it. So the actual resource that you're providing for these people, for this community, is way above what you put on your balance sheets.
It is, that's right.
Yeah,
it opens
amazing.
up other resources.
Yeah. But given that, Gina, I'm wondering, given the rhetoric that's been taking place around immigration, around refugees and so forth in the country, and the build-up to the Brexit vote and the period after that, given the attitudes we've seen towards Eastern European immigrants into the country, has there been any sense that because you're doing this, some people may be accusing you of, indirectly or directly, promoting illegal or inappropriate immigration into the country by providing these services? Any such experiences?
Illegal immigration in is probably overstating it. I mean, certainly some people do think that we shouldn't do what we do, obviously. I think some people think that we're sort of perpetuating a situation where people would otherwise leave the country. But as I said earlier, the reality is that people generally don't. There's a confusion around illegality. So I think probably there are people who have that opinion, exactly as we get remarkably little sort of hate mail or anything like that. I mean, we do get, a little bit of comment here and there, nothing too much. But there probably are people who have that opinion. But there's a confusion around illegality, that if you enter the country to claim asylum, that is a lawful act that is supported by international law. You are not what is called, there's incidentally no such thing as an illegal immigrant. That is not, it's not a category in law. I'm going to be legal now. It doesn't exist actually.
Okay.
But even if you were to say, you can enter illegally, and that can be a criminal offence. Of course, you hide in a lorry, obviously. But once you claim asylum, you are exercising an international law right. So all the people that we support have exercised that international law right. They've, of course, then had it turned down. But that does not make their presence illegal.
Okay.
They're on a status that has been called up to 2 weeks ago temporary admission.
Right.
They're not doing anything illegal by being here.
Right.
It's now called immigration bail. Nothing has changed. But the terminology, you'll get the point, I'm sure, straight away, emphasises the Home Office desire to have control over those people. So bail means we're letting you out of detention, but we could detain you if we want. That's always been the position. It's not if we want. That's a bit casual. If the grounds exist, all our clients can be detained. They're subject to detention, but they can only be detained if there are reasons to think that they might be removed from the country. So it's just that change of terminology is just underscoring that insecurity that our clients have, which is part of the hostile environment policy. But it doesn't change their actual position, which is they are admitted here and they're not doing anything illegal by being here.
Well, a big takeaway there that they're certainly not illegal, and that terminology isn't necessarily legal in reality.
Yeah, what you've just mentioned there is very, very interesting, because in terms of the terminology that is used and the way people take things, I believe sometimes, will you say, is the way the media portrays the term or portrays immigrant in this country, i.e. like other far-right newspapers or channels, the way things are portrayed. Because sometimes we know when immigration is talked about, there are people who exaggerate about the number of immigrants that comes in or about what they are given, you know. So will you say people, i.e. the British people, a lot of people, is them lacking the awareness of what is happening, you know?
People, I mean, you know, we all know what we're told, don't we? And yes, it's the media. It's also the government. So I think I do want to mention the hostile environment policy now, because it's pretty key here. So we have an official policy in this country, it's a government policy called the hostile environment. This is not something I've made up as somebody in the voluntary sector. This is official. It came out first of all in speeches of Theresa May, and it was the name of a working party, a government working party called the Hostile Environment Working Party. When Sarah Tether MP raised how atrocious that was, they changed the name to the Interministerial Working Party on something or other. But the policy continues, and the independent inspector of borders and immigration has written inspection reports about the hostile environment using those words. So this is formal terminology. The hostility is officially directed, according to government policy, at people who have no immigration right to be in the country. Now that does include our clients. It's not the same as being illegal, but they don't have leave to remain. But it also includes other people who've come and overstayed. Conceivably, you know, could it include a student who's worked more hours than she should have done on a student visa? You know, I mean, where's the limit? Anyway, these people are allegedly the target of the hostile environment. But of course, that hostility spills over. Because first of all, so it includes that people can't rent property, they can't have driving licences, they can't open bank accounts, they can't, as you know, get benefits, they can't get access to secondary health care, local authority housing. All these things are denied to this population of people who have no leave to remain. But of course, mistakes are made. So British people get told that their driving licence is being revoked, or their bank account is being closed, or they get a go home text from the Home Office. And that doesn't make it any worse, and if it's done to somebody else, actually, it's still a human being who's getting it. But it means that the hostility spreads from the target group. And also, in my view, now this is my personal view, and I think it's, you know, it's supported by probably certain, you know, plenty of other people, is that the hostility affects those who have to implement it. So this is where you were speaking before, actually, about our common humanity. You cannot be hostile to one group of people without everybody being affected. Because those bank clerks, those people in the DVLA, they have to implement it. What does that do to them? When they have a customer coming in, they have to ask these questions about a person's immigration status. What does that do to our relationships? So the hostile environment policy, sorry, I've gone off topic, but this is so important.
It's interesting.
It's very important.
It's fundamental to you know, what we do in Assist, but it's fundamental to many things, I think, now. It's fundamental to the immigration policy that we've got in this country, that it is somehow thought acceptable to label one group of people as being a legitimate target of government hostility. Once you've done that, you have opened the door. Who next is the target? You were referring to the Second World War. I think this is exactly the point. And it's an extremely dangerous policy. Now, I understand the current Home Secretary is wanting to change the terminology to the compliance environment. Well, we'll see that, you know, that has other problems associated with it. But in terms, it's going back to your question, do some people think we're doing something wrong? Yeah, I expect they do. More important is to address why we're in the position where those kind of allegations can be made with, if you like, with a clean conscience, because we have a government up here that is supporting the idea that hostility to one section of the population is acceptable.
I think, Gina, that point cannot be overstated, that what governments should do, what the social contract should be about, it should be about us coming together to do the things that make living our lives better. And I think that although there are concerns about immigration, people crossing borders, about refugees, people moving across the globe, I think that the way we should deal with it should be that our humanity comes first and then guides what we should do. And governments at all should never be hostile, because governments have already been given the authority to use all forms of violence when necessary and appropriate. And when a group that has been legitimately assigned the right to do that uses words such as hostility, what next? And where do we stop? Where is the checkpoint to say, well, this is hostility far too much, this is hostility okay? I think that those words really matter in terms of shaping how we think about ourselves and others. And I think the point that you make about how that does not just affect those who think it and ask others to do it, but also those who do it get affected by that.
Yes.
But let me drill a bit further into this, because I think it's an important debate. Now, Brexit is coming, and I'm wondering how. Last week we had a guest here, and we were talking about slave trade in the actual trading of human beings in Libya, and we considered how that relates to the actual intervention carried out by the West via the United Nations Security Council, which then destabilized Libya, making it a place where such trade can take place, providing a space on earth where human beings can be traded. And I'm wondering, and one of the things we noted about Libya is that actually Libya hasn't signed the United Nations Convention on Refugees.
Yeah.
And one of the important aspects of UK immigration law or immigration process has been the EU Human Rights Charter. And I'm wondering what you think would be the impact, or if you think that given the ideas of hostility and so forth, and I think it's a debate that we should have now before it happens, whether the United Kingdom may in effect, in one shape or another, attempt to completely move out of the confines of the Human Rights Charter, Treaty. And if that were the case, where would we be? Would things be getting worse? Because we're doing this now while we're in a part of this treaty. What do you think? What will be the dynamics around some conventions that aren't necessarily the United Nations, but are EU, that were important to our common humanity?
It's difficult, isn't it? It's interesting there's not been a lot of public discussion about the effect of Brexit on our asylum system. I mean, it's fairly unknown. I suppose, I mean, this might seem odd after everything I was just saying, but it is true to say that at the beginning of creating the common European asylum system, in some ways there was some levelling up to the then UK standards. So, we had nothing to be ashamed about as part of our creation of that system. We were quite, we were a positive, we made a positive input in lots of ways. Now, quite a lot of the procedural rights of asylum seekers are enshrined in some of the EU law, but at the same time, a lot of that also has its counterpart in UK law. Hard to say. I think that it's possible. It's a moment, isn't it, of possible opportunity, possible disaster. So the UK asylum policy really isn't really reliant on Europe in terms of the Refugee Convention, because we're signatories to the Refugee Convention. it is possible, I don't know how likely it is, that the UK could say, OK, so here's our opportunity to really stand by the proud tradition that is often mentioned and really establish ourselves as a country of refuge and high standards for asylum seekers. There's absolutely no reason on earth why we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's the risk of what goes along with the public policy rhetoric about Brexit, about that separation from Europe, about the identity that we're creating there, that may mean that we end up with a more negative asylum policy. But it will depend on the sort of rhetoric and identity that the UK government decides to try to create around these issues. And there must be some balancing of one issue with another. I don't know where asylum will fall in that. In terms of human rights, on the technical level, the European Convention on Human Rights, as you know, is not an EU organ. It comes out of the Council of Europe, which is a much bigger body, and we're not leaving the Council of Europe.
Yeah.
So the stuff that was said beforehand about then we'll come out of the European Convention on Human Rights, of course, is not true. It doesn't follow from our leaving the EU. There has been lots of talk about the British Bill of Rights and bringing rights home and repatriating rights and all that, and threats to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights. If that happened, I do think it would be pretty disastrous, actually.
Yeah.
When people talk about a British Bill of Rights, I think they don't mean a British Bill of Rights. I think they mean a Bill of Rights for some people and not others. Because, the people who've spoken about this, David Cameron used to talk about it, as I remember. And I used to say to myself, well, which right would he not want for his family? Fair trial, the right to privacy, the right to respect for family life, the right not to be subjected to torture, inhuman, degrading to treatment. I don't think so. I suspect that those people who discuss it would want all those rights for their family, all the rights in the convention. It's just that they don't want some people to have those rights. And those people are the people, back to it, I'm sorry, who are subject to migration control. So I think that's the risk.
It's a huge risk. Well, look, big takeaways from this lively discussion, the fact that the law doesn't make anyone necessarily illegal, the importance of the debate around our humanity. And we also got from Gina just now that leaving Brexit does not necessarily lead to leaving the convention, the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think that's important for our listeners there who may have been scared that that would happen. Any closing?
Well, there's not any better point to add there rather than more than what Gina has just said. Even me, I've learned a lot regarding to what she just mentioned, especially with Brexit and the word illegal as well. So now I'll make sure from now on I'll use my term right.
Right.
There are no illegal people, just illegal acts.
Exactly.
Yes. Right. This is African Voices. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.